Hi, Sarah. Hi, Cricket.
Hello.
Again.
Welcome to our conversation. Today is a Tuesday, April the 13th. Two more days into tax day, people. Are you in US, Cricket?
I am. Yes, I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay, okay. I didn't want to ask anymore. Every time Sarah have somebody on, I was like, "Are you from Tampa?" And Sarah's like, "You
Yes,
think I only know the people from Tampa?" So I stopped asking.
Oh, that's funny.
And then
I'm in
there's
Sydney
when people
Harbor.
from Tampa. When I But this is great. I am so glad to have you here, and we are continuing on the conversation about hope, dream, and then some reality check. But so today is Tuesday, and Sarah knows what to do because we always start our show with her. And yesterday we went off Kadudu. We didn't do that. And at the end, and she's like, "So are you gonna let me introduce?" And I was like, "We have no time, so we didn't even introduce ourselves yesterday." So here it is, Sarah. Go ahead, kick
all
it
right.
off.
It's my job to kick off this show. She doesn't want to say it today, but no. Okay, everybody. I'm so glad that we are back again together and we get to talk again. And just to save us time, I'm Sarah M. I grew up in Cambodia, and I have gone through a very difficult time in my country when the communist regime took over our country. They turned our life upside down, and they turned everything inside out and make us miserable. There are about 2 million of us that did not make it. So it was so sad. But I'm here to tell you that God is faithful. I'm so grateful that He was so faithful to save my life and save me from destruction. And I'm here. I'm grateful for all the people that I met here and rebuild my new life. So my hope and dream, I never dream of coming to United States, but the circumstance took me here. But I'm so happy that I was here. So I was able to write my book, my story in the book, and I could not find my book again. It's
It's there
it's
somewhere.
my book, How I Survived the Killing Fields. This is not a very sad, heartbreaking book. I I minimize it for so many reasons. So you will get a lot of inspiration from this book. You can find it on my website, sarahm.com. But if you like to hear me talk about it rather than reading, you can reach out to me and I can come and help you. And you can also reach out to Lee as well. We both are speakers. And now we know our guest today is also a speaker. So we are capable of helping our audience. Back to you, Lee.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, oftentimes it's not easy to tell your own story, but when you're able to tell your story and hoping for the impact of helping others, that's when telling story is powerful. And for many years, I too didn't think my story worth anything to say, to tell, because it's just so many people that I know also were in that condition. So I was a refugee also from Vietnam. And the area that I left, it's the same time that era, the same era with Sarah when communists took the Cambodia. Also, communists from the North Vietnam also invaded South Vietnam, And my family and I also lived in the 4 years of really unpredictable times in Vietnam, in South Vietnam. The oppression was so bad that up to the point that my family had to escape, fled the country along with hundreds of thousands of other people. Not at the same time, but in the same area of a period of time in that few years. Lots of people got drowned and lost their lives in the sea. Lots of boats didn't make it. Luckily, we did. Our boats got 502 people. It's one of the biggest that I have known so far, that I have not seen anybody escape out with that big of a boat. But my dad was part of the organization, and he was able to make that happen. Now, mind you, the boat was not big. Everybody's stacking like sardine on that boat. But we made it out, and thank God he had pity on us, and he took care of us, and he protected us. And we have been here for the last 40 years. And it took me that long to tell my story, because I think every single person have a PTSD in the past. Veterans, Holocaust victims, sometimes they just want to forget. They just want to bury things instead of talk about it. So the reason that, Sarah and I and many other people, who speak out just because that we think that with our story would help other people, to empower them to speak up and don't live in fear, because a lot of time, those times are the fearful time, and we let fear conquer us instead of letting our voice out. We just settle for whatever and keep the silence. So that's why I'm speaking up. I also wrote my memoir 6 months ago. So it's brand new because I didn't even have a chance to go out to do book tour. But you can get my book on my website, leetran.com, or on Amazon. If you want a Kindle book, there's an e-version over there. And I also give a very brief version on my TEDx talk. I did not miss the boat. Both the book and the TEDx are the same title. So you can easily find me, and, to get to know me, you can definitely find me online. And again, if you need speaker for inspirational, for women empowerment, I'm all there. I'm all there. So with that say, I want to welcome Cricket. I want to say Croquet, but I'm sorry, Crockett.
There you go.
Like the way she said it, Crockett. Cricket is a coach, right? And also an author and a speaker. So with a very, very unique name. And I love her story right at the very moment that I read about her grandmother call her Cricket. And, it's just so many things that even simple story, it doesn't have to be dramatic, crossing the jungle or the ocean, but even some very innocent, beautiful story would trigger us and bring us to the childhood and holding grandma's hands. And so that's beautiful part. And I would love Cricket to tell us who exactly she is and why she is doing what she does, speaking and helping other women. Welcome.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I love what you both said about your story, and I can relate on a very different level, obviously. My story, my personal story, is not one that I wanted to embrace initially. And I really found myself wrestling with the Lord saying, no, this is not my story. This is not what, I didn't choose this. I don't want this. And so very, very different circumstances. And I praise God that you are both here. But I can very much relate. I too felt the tug on my heart from the Lord to share my story in a book. And so I decided, instead of writing an entire book, that I joined an anthology called The Mom in Me. And that's where I share a little bit of my story. So that can be found on Amazon, but also on my website at cricketcrockett.com. So yeah, similar, I've got a story, don't we all? And we can choose to use it to encourage and love on others, or we can be ashamed of it, or fearful of it, or regret.
Yeah.
And I just decided, what good is that, right? What good is that to live in shame and regret? And because as much as we want to forget some of the things from our past that are so painful, God has certainly used those circumstances to refine us and to further his kingdom. So,
Right.
But yeah, so I have a background actually in sales, a very successful background in direct sales for almost close to 20 years with 2 different companies. And prior to that, I was a first grade teacher. So I did not see a transition into sales coming at all, but it did. And what I found through building my team and working with people and selling is I really love working with adults instead of children. Now, I love children. I have 2 of my own who are grown. We're empty nesters here in Safety Harbor, Florida. Whoop, whoop.
I know. Yeah. Right. Woo-hoo.
Exactly. But I found that it was incredibly rewarding to love on, encourage, support, coach adults. And so when the decline of my company began, I really started seeking the Lord on, okay, where do you want me to go? What now? I had a little bit of an identity crisis with the company because I was very successful in it, and I sort of lost me. And so through, a season of just figuring things out and getting some counseling and digging deep and struggling with some depression during that time, and raising my firstborn, who was a challenge with multiple diagnoses, I just sort of pushed pause on everything and said, okay, I have lived my life for everybody. I have poured from an empty vessel time and time again. And yet when I read God's word, that's not what he calls us to do.
No.
So what am I doing here? Burnout should not be a surprise. And so I worked for many years to sort of better myself. But the one thing I never lost sight of was working with women, encouraging, loving on them, coaching them, speaking to them. And so that's when I decided to become certified as a leadership and life coach a couple of years ago, and then launched my practice during the pandemic, if you can believe that. So that's kind of my, long story short. You mentioned something about my name, and on my birth certificate, my name is Tracy. But when I started this soul searching time in my life, which ran 3-4 years, to be honest with you, it was a real time of surrender. I sought the help of an incredible Christian counselor. And one of the very first things she said to me is, well, what do you want out of life? And I said, I just want to be Cricket again. And she, dug deeper and said, who is this Cricket? And I said, that's who I was prior to this. That's what my family calls me. That's what my grandparents call me. And she was fun and easy and, didn't stress so much and didn't stay up all night. And I just want to be her again. And so she said, then be her, rebrand you. And that's sort of how I came back around to being who I, truly want to be, and how I feel like God wants me to show up. So that's
Tracy is a beautiful name. Tracy is a beautiful name, but I feel so much more relaxed with Cricket. It just sometimes, we have to put off that guard, that shell, that who made us who we supposed to be. I feel many ways that we're in the same boat, because I also stepping out and creating this journey myself in the smack of the damn pandemic too. Like Sarah had launched her books 5 years ago, right? I literally just launched it 6 months ago. And I felt like my baby has not been Christianing, has not been show up anywhere except by Zoom. I feel like it's so much constrained. But it is gratifying because I feel the same way for many years, not just me, not just you. I believe that many of us have put family on the top of the list, and we do everything we could to support that, which is fine. But then sometimes you feel drained because you have scraped from the bottom to give and you have nothing left for yourself. And that's why I begin this journey to fulfill my self-fulfilling, I call it a desire that I also want to speak out. It's just because that I think that I got to step away from doing something that is comfortable, invisible. It just pleasing everyone, but feel stuck.
Yes. Yes.
And
that is exactly my heart, to coach women who are in that predicament. And,
right.
It's so common, but we just don't tend to, talk about it. We don't tend to share that part of us that says, how can I be in my 40s or my 50s or whatever and not know what I want to be when I grow up?
Right.
And yet at the same time, that's how everyone feels,
But I think I'm always say that God has a time for everything.
Absolutely.
Because you can't do any of those when you're raising a kid. You can't do any of those when it's just like I don't think that we're late. We have career in the past, children, husband, family to care for. I'm also empty nester. My son's been out for a couple years from college, but we moved down here as soon as like a year after he was in college, and we's like, where do we fit in the picture? We got to go find some soul searching here. And I think it is such a time that many of us, women particularly, felt like the purpose of being a mom has no longer serving after they left the home. Your children left your home, and then you start to thinking about, who am I?
Absolutely.
And sometimes you just feel like you can't give if you're empty, if you don't have anything. So you have to start replenish yourself. And I kudos to you. I mean, I feel really scary starting a new journey at my age, which I don't want to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm in the high 50 and I'm starting a new career. So it is very, very scary.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that it's going to make me happy, going to bed knowing that I can do anything I want. It doesn't matter at what age. And so stepping out to do that, I really appreciate, you share your journey because it's so relevant to a lot of women.
Right. And that's what faith is, right? It's stepping out when you hear the calling.
Yeah.
And being scared to death. And that literally is faith, because that's when we lean on the Lord the most. Yeah. And it can be incredibly humbling as well. Like I said, this journey started for me a couple of years ago, leaving, a lucrative direct sales job. I was, the top of the career path. I mean, I had people asking for my autograph, as strange as that is. And, was speaking at national conferences full of thousands, and then heard this still small voice say, and now we're going to begin to step away. And I was like, whoa, hang on now. And it's scary. It's scary. So I definitely hear you, and, want to normalize that for you as well, because so many people experience that. But,
you do anything
there's no magic in being there. The magic doesn't happen when we're comfortable, right?
Right. Yeah, it is true. So do you do anything that catered to the audience that you served before? Is there a place that you can resurface back to reconnect with the previous life? The reason I say that is because when I'm launching my new, whatever you want to call it, career, profession, business, I do have contact from people from my previous life, which people are watching, because you don't know who's watching when you're out there. But people do reach back and say, wow, I see the changes. I want to ask question. I want a little piece of this. Do you get a lot of those connection back there to those people that you served before?
Yes and no. It's interesting that you asked that question. What I have found is that the people who say that to me say, I've been watching your journey quietly for a while now. And
Cricket.
maybe they never liked something or commented on something. I didn't even know they were there. And yet here they are saying, what a difference you've made. The flip side to that is I haven't heard from some people like I thought I would. And in fact, just recently, I was really discouraged about that. And I was praying about it during my quiet time. And I felt strongly that the Lord said to me, stop fishing in old ponds.
Yeah.
And I wrote that down so fast. I'm like, that is such a word for this season. You can't go fishing for fresh fish when you're fishing in old ponds that you've already emptied the stock, right? So yes and no. I know that I have lifelong friendships and connections from the last several decades, and it's a joy and it's wonderful. But at the same time, they've had the experience of coaching with me or listening to me speak for free, right? Because it was part of my job description then. And so now it's a little bit different, but that's okay. God's just going to use it, and he's bringing me into a new place and a new season. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
It's just funny that you said that, because I feel the same way. As long as you show up, you put yourself out there, and you will attract the people who need your service.
Yeah.
Because there's time, right, Sarah? There's time you think that this person has been so close to me, she's going to support me, or he's going to support me. And it turned out they don't. Because I think maybe they were afraid that they're going to lose you because you have stepped into a completely new path that they're not familiar with. I don't know. I try not to be putting assumption of anything anymore. But there's people that you didn't even think they watch, and all of a sudden you get an email, you get a text, and it's like, oh my God, I've seen you this, and people you haven't talked to for 10, 15 years. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh, I've been following you. It's like, me? You've been following me? So I think, you don't have to go to an old pond. The mosquito will follow, or the frog will follow. If they feel like, you are the same type of attraction.
That's so true. That's so true. I recently, and I'll probably mess this up, but I recently saw a graphic shared on social media that said something along the lines of, you're feeling sad because you're not being invited to the table when God is actually preparing a new table for you.
That's exactly.
And again, like I said, I'm probably botching it. So if any of your watchers or listeners are like, that's not exactly what it said, at least that's what it said to me.
But the concept is there.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
The concept is there.
Yeah.
So in your introduction, you mentioned about pushing pause for the benefit of our audience. Would you explain what that means?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that is sort of my motto, if you will. And that happened, in my opinion, accidentally, but nothing is of accident, really. When I went through a period of depression and anxiety, sort of wrestling with God, it's like Jonah, right? Like he calls him to Nineveh, and Jonah's like, oh. And so he ended up in the belly of a whale. So, well, that was my season in the belly of the whale, I suppose. But I say to people that I was forced into a pause. I think everyone can relate to that when we're going all the time, right? Even during the pandemic, right? We're going all the time, and we kind of know I probably need to rest. I probably need to take time out, and then we don't. And then we end up sick and in the bed, right? And we go, darn it. Like I knew I was burning my candle at both ends. Well, our physical and mental body works the same. And I was so busy achieving hitting the mark, doing all the things I was supposed to do, wearing that mask of success and achievement and trying to prove whatever I was trying to prove, right? And then I just hit a wall. It's what I call in my book, the crash. And even though to the world it looked like, and I mean, quite frankly, it looked like depression, right? It was a sweet and tender time where I began to truly surrender and grieve some things. We often connect grief with death. And while I was also grieving my mother's death, there were many things in there that I needed to grieve that were the death of a dream, the death of a goal, a death of an expectation. And so I spent that time really crying out and learning what it means to truly surrender and let go. And when I was in a healthy place, I noticed that as I would start to sort of explain that to people, I would use that phrase, pushing pause. And I caught myself saying it over and over again. And so when I began to work with a coach myself on how to start a coaching business, I kept saying that. And I thought, that's it. Yeah. I want to help women recognize the power of pushing pause, because I was forced into a pause because I didn't listen to the little white flags of surrender that my mind, body, heart, and soul were putting up. So I was forced into that pause. But what I'd like to do is work with high achieving, successful, highly driven women to help them recognize the power of pushing pause so that they're not forced into a pause like I was. So that's what that means. And pushing pause doesn't have to look like days in the bed. It can be simply just taking a moment out to do a little deep breathing. It's an intentional act to stop for a moment, take a breath, maybe journal, maybe pray. It can be as little as a few minutes and as much as a few days. So it's not so much about the time that we pause, but what we do with that time.
Yeah. So it is so true. I think we're both aiming to help a pool of very, very similar clients, similar people, women in particularly. And I think that many of us have this desire of high achieving things. What's next? What's next? We've done that. Check that. Okay, so what's next? What's next? And there's no time to decompress. I call it decompress. It's stop, like you say, pushing that pause to recognize you got to celebrate what you achieve. You can't just keep going on, because soon enough you're going to stack with all this stress, all this thing, and it's going to take a toll in your body. Not just that, your mind didn't even have time to spring back to where it's supposed to be before you compress it again. And I think it is so necessary. It is so simple things. Everybody knows how to do it, but many times we don't do it for ourselves. We wait for somebody to tell us to do it.
Or our body forces us to do
it. Oh yeah, when you're sick, right? And even when you're sick.
That's a counterintuitive concept, you know, because we, like you said, we're so busy checking boxes and doing, that we don't stop to say, is this something I should be doing? Setting boundaries is probably the number one thing that I coach on, because people don't realize that they can set boundaries. They think it's rude, or they think it's
yes to everything. Yes to everything.
So we put ourselves oftentimes in that predicament because we don't say, okay, where are we supposed to be? We can't have our hands in every cookie jar at the same time, even though we are. Yeah.
So what are other concepts that you learned after you take yourself away from the direct sale industry?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because like I said, it was kind of a time of renewal, recharging, rebranding. Who do I want to be? Who is God calling me to be? Because I was on this like hamster wheel for so long, trying to do all the things I thought I was supposed to do. But quite frankly, I got to a place where I wasn't even truly enjoying it anymore. But I felt trapped by the paycheck, and I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. And so after I worked to sort of rewire my mindset around that, it was just such a great opportunity to rest and recover. Those were my 2 words for many years. And I found myself, whenever I would start to go back into that place of achievement and doing, right, and performance, I really felt like the Lord was like, nope, we're going to rest and recover. Because
I love that.
to be honest with you, a lot of us use that sort of productivity or busyness as this badge of honor, right? And it's a way to stuff our feelings. It's a way to distract ourselves from really dealing with what we need to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I learned, as all of that began to be stripped away, I was left alone with me and my thoughts and my grief and my anxiety and whatever else. And that's when I began a real process and a real journey of growing deeper and, really trying to figure out the next steps. And that pause gives us such clarity. So, and it was wonderful. It was beautiful. It wasn't always fun, but it was always necessary.
But you know what? There's always things to do. You're never going to answer all the email in your mailbox. You're never, ever going to be clean up to the point that you don't need to clean anymore. Things will stay there and wait for you. It doesn't matter how complete you are. There's going to be new tasks. But right. I love the part that rest and recover, because that's the only way you can rejuvenate and move on. Because if you don't rest, you can't recover.
So true. And we found ourselves, my husband and I, in a real season of just survival. We were hurting, we were sad, things that were going on with our son. And the truth of the matter is, we were both such high achievers that we really didn't have a community.
Yeah.
I mean, we had friends, right? Well, we had connections, but it wasn't that close-knit community where we could say, I'm struggling, I'm hurting.
Yeah.
Like, can we go out to lunch, or can you come pray with me, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So I learned a really valuable lesson, that those things that you're talking about, right? Like the cleaning, the dishes, the laundry, while it is important for us to take care of those things, they will wait. Your dishes will wait. They will be there, right? When you come back, your dirty clothes will still be there. But what may not be there is the relationships and the community that we all need as human beings to have that iron sharpens iron, right? When the armor gets so heavy to wear and we need to say to somebody, I need your help.
Yeah.
When you don't spend time to sharpen that because you're so focused over here,
right,
that can be a detriment.
So as much as we talking about there's hope, doesn't matter what stage in our lives, as we realize that what we can fix, what we didn't happy about, we were not satisfied, because the armor will get heavier each time you add on whatever that you did not have that boundary to take off. You take on so many things. And I love the part that is, you got to cultivate a relationship that with substance, not just the surface about have you done this or what, it's just like real meaningful relationship, so you can actually call them up at 3 a.m. if you need to. But how's the reality check for you so far?
It's wonderful, because I've always been known as being a rather intentional person. And I think actually that, truth be told, goes back to my ADD, right? Like I have to be intentional or it won't happen. But now I'm taking that intentionality and applying it to relationships. And instead of just having, people that we know,
right,
I'm spending the time to have quality relationships. And that's so important to me. I'm not interested in the shallow relationships. It just takes too much energy and it doesn't give back, right? So spending the time to really, like you used a great word, cultivate, to grow, to weed out, right? And giving ourselves the permission to do that. I mean, we were not called to do it all or to please everybody, or, I mean, you know, and I think we mix what we hear, what the culture says about us, what expectations, maybe what we saw other people do, instead of just pushing pause and saying, wait a minute, what do I want? I don't have
There's
to.
so many temptation out there. I mean, it's like every time you turn around, there's something else that you can do to occupy the time.
Absolutely.
And then you're
But
going to
you
be
can't say
drained.
no.
I know.
learned a really great thing. No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that your no does not need an explanation. We don't have to explain and prove
True.
people why we can't do that for them, with them, whatever. And it's not personal. And some people will think it is, but we're not responsible for their reaction either. We just have to be kind and, you know, set boundaries and stick to it for our own self-preservation.
I would say write your own policy, right? In a big company, it's always like, it's not in my policy or not the company's policy. So you can write your own policy and say that, ooh, that's not my policy.
I like that. That's great.
So, Cricket, we enjoy talking with you, but I know that your time is you have such a intense schedule, especially now in the next few days. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I've actually just created my first event that is all mine. I've had the pleasure of being a part of many other conferences and summits as a speaker and as a coach and even as a vendor and those kind of things. But I think it's like my teaching background maybe that's equipped me to say, hey, I want to create something different. You know, in my direct sales world, I was responsible for creating conferences for my team, retreats and that sort of thing. And I loved it, but I always thought I want to do this out from underneath that umbrella. So here I go.